Chapter 1. Arrival in the New World. The fog clung to the waters of New York Harbor like a thief's cloak, thick and unforgiving under the gray dawn of September 1923. The SS Ardennes sliced through it, her hull groaning against the swells, a British freighter masquerading as a humble cargo vessel laden with textiles and machinery from Liverpool to sea. But beneath the decks, in false bottoms and hollowed bulkheads, lay the real treasure. Cases of finest Scotch and Irish whiskey, enough to drown a city's thirst and line the pockets of men who thrived in the shadows of Prohibition. Captain Elias Hawthorne stood at the bridge, his weathered face etched with the lines of 100 illicit runs. He glanced sideways at the man who had chartered his ship, the one who called the shots without raising his voice. Tommy Shelby, leader of the Peaky blinders from Birmingham's mean streets, leaned against the rail, his cap pulled low over piercing blue eyes. A cigarette dangled from his lips, smoke curling into the mist like a signal to unseen allies. "Customs cutters on the starboard bow," Hawthorne muttered, his voice gravelly from years of salt and secrets. "They're hailing us." Tommy didn't flinch. He flicked ash into the wind and straightened his overcoat, the weight of a Webley revolver hidden inside a comfort against the unknown. "Let them board. We've nothing to hide." Officially, the inspection was routine, or so it seemed. The U.S. Customs officers, stern-faced in their uniforms, poked through manifests and sampled the declared cargo. Tommy watched from the shadows of the companionway, his expression impassive, but his mind raced like the Thames at flood. One wrong crate, one loose panel, and the whole operation crumbled before it began. The Peaky blinders had sunk fortunes into this venture, routes plotted across the Atlantic, bribes greased in Liverpool docks, and now the gateway to America's dry empire. The lead inspector, a burly man with a mustache like a broom, paused at the engine room hatch. Tommy's heart ticked faster, but he stepped forward, offering a cigarette with a disarming smile. "Long night, officer?" "These waters play tricks on a man." The inspector eyed him suspiciously, but took the smoke, lighting it with a match that flared briefly in the gloom. "You British, eh? What's a limey doing hauling scrap to the States?" "Business," Tommy replied smoothly, his Birmingham accent clipped and precise. "Textiles for the garment district. The war's over, but folks still need clothes." Grunts of approval from the crew echoed as they shifted crates with practiced ease. No one sweated. No one faltered. The whiskey was buried deep, under engine grease, behind false walls welded by Arthur Shelby's own hands, in a black country foundry. By the time the inspectors departed, satisfied with their cursory probe, the SS Ardennes was cleared to dock at Pier 58. As the lines were thrown and the gangway lowered, Tommy gathered his men. Arthur, his brother, broad-shouldered and volatile, nursing a flask against the chill. John, younger and sharper, eyes darting for threats. And a handful of trusted Peaky lads, razors sewn into their caps, ready for whatever New York threw at them. "We offload the goods tonight," Tommy said, voice low. "Contacts waiting at the warehouse on 14th. No mistakes." The city unfolded before them like a beast awakening. Manhattan's skyline pierced the fog. Towers of steel and stone, symbols of a new world built on ambition and excess. Horns blared from ferries, and the air hummed with the babel of immigrants and hustlers. Tommy stepped onto the pier, the wooden planks creaking under his boots, feeling the pulse of opportunity. Prohibition had turned America into a parched giant, and the Shelbys would quench it. For a price. They moved like ghosts through the docks, blending with stevedores and sailors. The warehouse was a squat brick building off the Hudson, its windows blacked out, guarded by a lone figure in a fedora who nodded at Tommy's approach. "Mr. Shelby?" "Name's Mickey Doyle. Heard you were coming in hot." Tommy sized him up. Irish stock, weaselly eyes, the kind who talked fast and sold faster. "You the connection?" Doyle grinned, yellow teeth flashing. "For the right price. Got a truck ready." "Where's the load?" "Under cover of dusk. The whiskey came ashore. Crates were manhandled from the ship's hidden holds, swung onto dollies, and trundled into the warehouse. Arthur oversaw it with a growl, cracking a bottle open to test the seal. "Smooth as silk, Tommy. This'll fetch a fortune in the speakeasies." But fortune came with fangs. As the last case was stowed, shouts erupted from the pier. Customs again? No, worse. A rival gang, shadows spilling from an alley, Tommy guns glinting in the gaslight. "Federals tipped him!" John yelled, drawing his pistol. Gunfire cracked the night, bullets splintering wood and ricocheting off iron. Tommy dove behind a stack of crates, his Webley barking in response. One Peaky went down, clutching his side. But the blinders fought like demons. Precise, unrelenting. Doyle's men joined the fray, turning the tide. In the chaos, Tommy spotted the leader, a scar-faced brute, and put 2 rounds in his chest. The attackers scattered, leaving bodies and echoes. Breathing hard, Tommy wiped blood from his cheek. Not his own. Who were they? Doyle spat on the ground. Rothstein's boys, probably. Arnold Rothstein, the big Jew gambler up in Manhattan. Controls half the hoop coming from Canada. Don't like competition. Tommy lit another cigarette. The flame steady despite the adrenaline. And the Federals? Prohibition agents. Dry as dust, those bastards. But we got insiders. For now. Doyle pocketed a wad of bills. Tommy's advance. "You need more? Distributors? I know people. Atlantic City," Tommy said, exhaling smoke. "Heard it's a hub. Who's running it?" Doyle's eyes narrowed. "Nucky Thompson, treasurer of Atlantic County. But don't let the suit fool you. He's the kingpin. Owns the Boardwalk, the casinos, the whole damn shore. Smuggles more liquor than God makes rain. Connected to politicians, cops. Hell, even the president owes him favors." Tommy nodded, filing it away. Rothstein in New York was a shark, but Thompson sounded like the whale. Alliances could be forged in such waters, or wars. The Peaky blinders had clawed their way from Birmingham's gutters. America was just a bigger gutter, ripe for the taking. By midnight, the whiskey was dispersed, half to Doyle's network for quick sale in Harlem speakeasies. The rest held for bigger plays. Tommy and his brothers holed up in a waterfront flophouse, the room reeking of fish and cheap gin. Arthur paced, bandaging the wounded man's arm. "This place is a madhouse, Tommy. Gangs everywhere. We sticking?" Tommy stared out the grimy window at the harbor lights. The Statue of Liberty, a distant silhouette. Prohibition's a gold mine. 13 years of it, and the thirst only grows. But we need roots. Thompson, he's got the ports, the protection. We propose a pact. Our roots from England, his docks in Jersey. Together, we flood the East Coast. John chuckled, cleaning his gun. "And if he says no?" Tommy's smile was cold. "Then we take what we need." Dawn broke with a ferry's horn, and Tommy made his decision. A telegram to contacts back home. Secure more ships. Then to Doyle. Arrange transport south. The Ford truck rumbled to life outside, loaded with samples. Proof of the blinder's quality. Arthur and John would scout New York, build the web, while Tommy headed to Atlantic City alone, a wolf in gentleman's clothing. As the truck jolted over potholed roads toward the Jersey shore, Tommy unfolded a map, tracing the path to the glittering boardwalk. Nucky Thompson awaited, iron grip or not. The new world was open, and the Shelbys were here to claim it. The journey south wound through industrial sprawl, giving way to pine-barren stretches, the air growing saltier with each mile. Tommy traveled light, a valise with cash, documents forged in London's back alleys, and the unyielding resolve that had toppled gangs in England. Doyle's driver, a taciturn Italian named Vito, filled the silence with snippets of lore. "Atlantic City's something else, Mr. Shelby. Bright lights, big money. But Nucky, he don't suffer fools. You gotta play his game." Tommy nodded, eyes on the horizon. Every city's got its game. We learn the rules, then rewrite them. By afternoon, the skyline shifted. The ocean's vast blue meeting the man's intrusion, a pier thrusting into the waves like a gauntlet thrown. The boardwalk came into view, a ribbon of wood alive, even in the off-season, with strollers, barkers, and the undercurrent of vice. Saltwater taffy scents mingled with cigar smoke, and the crash of Atlantic waves underscored Fortune's wheel. Vito dropped him at a modest hotel, the Breakers, far from the Ritz's grandeur but close enough to observe. Tommy checked in under an alias, Thomas Larkin, importer, and ascended to a room overlooking the surf. Unpacking, he placed his cap on the dresser, a talisman of home, and poured a measure of the pilfered whiskey. It burned smooth, a reminder of Birmingham's factories, and the blood spilled to protect them. That evening, he ventured out, blending into the crowds. The boardwalk pulsed, couples arm in arm, children with cotton candy, but beneath it, the real trade flowed. Tommy spotted runners, kids darting with messages, men in sharp suits eyeing newcomers. At a dive called the Rusty Anchor, he nursed a tea that was pure gin and struck up conversation with a local, a weasel-faced bootlegger named Slim D. "New in town?" Slim asked, sliding onto the stool beside him. Tommy bought him a drink. "Looking to expand. Heard Thompson runs things tight." Slim laughed, a wheezy bark. "Tight as a nun's corset. But fair, if you pay tribute." "You got goods?" From across the pond. "Best there is." Eyes lighting. Slim leaned in. "Nucky's always scouting new suppliers. But watch your back. Lots of wolves here." Tommy filed the name, the faces. By night's end, he'd gleaned enough. Thompson's office in the Ritz, his reach into City Hall, the fragile peace with Italian and Irish factions. Intrigue coiled like smoke. Opportunity beckoned. Back in his room, Tommy wired Arthur. Hold position. Scouting alliance. The die was cast. Tomorrow, he'd seek an introduction. Propose the pact that could bind empires or break them. The new world shimmered with promise, and Tommy Shelby intended to drink deep. Chapter 2. The Boardwalk, King. The salt-tanged wind whipped off the Atlantic as Tommy Shelby stepped onto the bustling boardwalk of Atlantic City. It was late afternoon, the sun dipping low over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the glittering facade of this American pleasure palace. From the moment his train pulled into the station, Tommy could feel the pulse of the place. Electric, intoxicating, and laced with danger. The boardwalk stretched out like a ribbon of temptation, lined with grand pavilions, candy-striped awnings, and the ceaseless chatter of hawkers peddling saltwater taffy, hot dogs, and dreams of fortune at the slot machines. Laughter mingled with the crash of waves, and somewhere in the distance, a brass band struck up a jaunty tune, masking the undercurrent of illicit deals being struck in shadowed alcoves. Tommy adjusted the brim of his flat cap, his sharp blue eyes scanning the crowd. He wore a tailored three-piece suit, the fabric whispering of Birmingham's industrial grit against the flashy opulence here. In his pocket, a pack of cigarettes and the weight of his Webley revolver. Reminders that this was no seaside holiday. He'd left New York behind after a hasty round of introductions in the speakeasies of Hell's Kitchen, where whispers of Nucky Thompson's name had surfaced like bubbles in bootleg gin. Nucky, they said, was the king of this boardwalk empire, pulling strings from City Hall to the farthest reaches of the Jersey Shore. If Tommy wanted a foothold in America's dry thirst, he'd need more than a shipload of scotch. He'd need an alliance. He moved with purpose through the throng, sidestepping families licking ice cream cones and couples, arm in arm under the flickering lights of early evening. The air hummed with the scent of popcorn and sea brine, but Tommy's nose twitched at the sharper tang of cigarette smoke and perfume, signals of the real business transpiring. His contact, a wiry Irishman named Mickey Doyle, had arranged passage on the train and promised to meet him near the steel pier. Mickey was a small-time operator, running hooch from Canada through the back alleys, but he had ears in Nucky's organization. Spotting the pier's towering sign, a massive girder structure promising thrills and chills. Tommy veered toward a nearby bench where a newsboy hawked headlines about Babe Ruth's latest home run. No sign of Mickey yet. Tommy lit a cigarette, inhaling deeply as he watched a group of flappers in beaded dresses giggle past, their escorts eyeing him with casual suspicion. This place was a powder keg, he thought. Prohibition had turned every port into a battlefield, and Atlantic City was the crown jewel. A shadow fell over him. "Mr. Shelby? From the old country?" Tommy looked up to see Mickey, his face pockmarked and grinning like a man who'd just won at roulette. He was shorter than Tommy expected, dressed in a rumpled suit that smelled faintly of fish and whiskey. "Aye," Tommy replied, exhaling smoke. "You're late." Mickey chuckled, rubbing his hands together. "Boardwalk traffic, governor. Never know when the coppers'll sniff around. Come on, let's walk. Can't stand still too long here." They fell into step, weaving through the crowds. Mickey talked fast, his accent a thick brogue softened by years stateside. "Nucky's the man you want. Controls the whole damn coast. Politicians in his pocket, unions on a string. But he's picky about outsiders. Brits especially. Thinks you're all T-swilling toffs trying to muscle in." Tommy nodded, his expression impassive. "I've got product. Good product. From Scotland. Straight off the boat. He gets routes, I get access." Mickey glanced sideways. "He'll want proof you're not some fly-by-night." Last Limey who showed up ended up floating face down in the surf. They paused at a saltwater taffy stand, the vendor pulling strings of candy with rhythmic efficiency. Mickey bought a bag, offering Tommy a piece. Tommy declined. "I've arranged the meet," Mickey continued, voice low. "Ritz-Carlton, tonight down. 8 sharp. Back room off the bar. But word of advice, Nucky don't like surprises. Bring credentials, not guns." Tommy's lip curled slightly. "Credentials? Like what? Show him what you can do. He's got a little test in mind for fellas like you." By dusk, the boardwalk had transformed into a neon wonderland. Strings of electric bulbs illuminated the facades of the grand hotels, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the wooden planks. Jazz spilled from open doors, saxophones wailing over the rhythmic thud of dancers' feet. Tommy made his way to the Ritz-Carlton, a beacon of luxury rising like a white-cliffed sentinel. Porters in crisp uniforms ushered guests through revolving doors, where crystal chandeliers glittered against marble floors. Tommy handed his hat to the coat check, feeling the eyes of the concierge, a sharp-nosed man with a pencil mustache, assess him. "Reservation for Shelby," Tommy said evenly. The concierge consulted a ledger. "Of course, sir. Mr. Thompson's party is expecting you. This way." He was led through the lobby, past velvet settees where swells and tuxedos sipped illegal cocktails from teacups, to a discreet elevator. It deposited him on the 5th floor, where a liveried attendant knocked on a heavy oak door. "Mr. Shelby, to see Mr. Thompson." The door swung open, revealing a dimly lit suite heavy with cigar smoke and the murmur of low voices. Nucky Thompson stood at the center, a commanding figure in his 50s, impeccably dressed in a pinstripe suit, his face a mask of calculated charm. Flanking him were 2 men, one burly, with a scarred cheek, likely muscle, and the other slender, bespectacled, scribbling notes in a ledger. The room overlooked the boardwalk, its windows framing the glittering expanse below. "Mr. Shelby," Nucky said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, appraising. "Heard you made quite the splash in New York. Whiskey from the Isles, is it?" Tommy shook his hand, meeting Nucky's gaze without flinching. "The best. Aged proper. Not that rot gut they brew in bathtubs. I'm here to talk business." Nucky gestured to a sideboard laden with decanters, ironic, given the law. "Pour yourself a drink. Real stuff, courtesy of a friend up north." As Tommy fixed a whiskey, smooth Canadian, not Scotch, Nucky settled into a leather armchair. "Mickey says you're from Birmingham. Peaky Blinders, right? Street gang turned empire. I've read the wires. Ruthless bunch." Tommy took a sip, the burn familiar yet foreign. We get the job done. No frills. Nucky leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Atlantic City's my town. Shelby. I run the show. Elections, enforcers, everything. Outsiders come and go. But partnerships, those are earned. His eyes narrowed. You want in on the docks? My docks? You'll prove you're worth the risk. Tommy set his glass down. Name it. Nucky smiled thinly. Simple test. There's a shipment coming in tonight. Small, but sticky. Couple cases of rye from Philly, delayed by a nosy customs man. My boys were supposed to handle it, but one's in the clink. Get it off the beach at Absakan Inlet, past the patrols, and deliver to the warehouse on Virginia Avenue. Do it clean, no traces. Show me your blinder's efficiency. The burly man, Ellie Thompson, Nucky's brother, Tommy would later learn, snorted. Kid's got balls, but the inlet's crawling with feds at night. Tommy ignored him, focusing on Nucky. How many men? 3, including you. My contact on the boat will signal with a lantern. Fail, and you're on the next train back to England. Succeed. We talk terms. Tommy nodded once. Done. The night air was cooler by the inlet, the boardwalk's glow a distant memory. Tommy had rendezvoused with 2 Peaky blinders he'd brought over on the ship. Arthur, his hot-headed brother, and John, the sharpshooter with a penchant for knives. They'd slipped out of the Ritz separately, arming themselves lightly. Revolvers tucked in waistbands, razors sewn into cap brims. The beach was a strip of moonlit sand, waves lapping like conspirators. Tommy, this Yankee bollocks, Arthur grumbled, lighting a fag. His mustache twitched with irritation. Testing us like we're bloody apprentices. Quiet, Tommy snapped. Eyes open. Signal, any second. They crouched behind a dune, the salt marsh whispering in the breeze. Minutes stretched into an eternity until a faint flicker pierced the dark. A lantern on a small fishing boat bobbing offshore. Tommy signaled back with a pocket torch, 3 short flashes. The boat nosed toward shore, engine cut to a murmur. 2 shadowy figures rode a dinghy laden with wooden crates, grunting as they beached it. Tommy's men emerged, silent as ghosts. You Thompson's boys? The rower whispered, a Philly accent rough as gravel. Tommy stepped forward. Shelby, let's move. Well, they hauled the crates, 20 in all, each stamped with innocuous fishing labels but reeking of mash. The weight was deceptive, rye sloshed inside. John scouted ahead, his lithe form vanishing into the dunes. Arthur took the rear, pistol drawn. Patrol lights swept the beach a half-mile south. Coast Guard, no doubt. Tommy's heart rate steady, calculating. Through the inlet reeds. Keep low. Might. The group slogged through knee-deep water, crates balanced on shoulders. Mosquitoes buzzed, but no one complained. A sudden beam cut the night, a federal cutter idling nearby. Voices carried. Anything on the scopes? Tommy froze, gesturing for silence. The boat drifted past, oblivious. They pressed on, emerging on a service road where a battered Ford waited. Courtesy of Mickey, loading was swift. John hot-wired the engine, and they rumbled toward Virginia Avenue, the warehouse a hulking shadow against the skyline. At the drop, Nucky's men waited, wary, but they unloaded without a word. Tommy lit a cigarette, watching the crates vanish inside. Clean, he said to Arthur. Now we see if the king's impressed. Back at the Ritz by midnight, the suite door opened to Nucky's approving nod. Eli clapped Tommy on the back, harder than necessary. Not bad, Britt. No shots fired, no tails. Nucky poured fresh drinks, this time scotch, Tommy's own sample from New York. Efficient, ruthless even. Your blinders move like they own the shadows. He raised his glass. Tentative partnership. Shelby, you get dock access for your shipments. 2 berths, monitored of course. In exchange, manpower for my operations and those new routes from England. Steady supply. No hiccups. Tommy clinked glasses. the amber liquid catching the light. Agreed. But monitor all you like. We deliver. Nucky's eyes gleamed with caution. Welcome to the Boardwalk, Tommy. Just remember, alliances here are like the tide, always shifting. As Tommy left the hotel, the Boardwalk's neon haze enveloped him once more. The alliance was forged, fragile as spun glass, but it was a start. In the distance, jazz wailed on, a siren's call to greater ambitions. Chapter 3. Forging the Alliance. The salt-tinged air of Atlantic City carried the distant hum of the Boardwalk, even as the sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the ocean in strokes of fiery orange. Tommy Shelby stood on the balcony of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, a cigarette dangling from his lips, the smoke curling lazily into the evening breeze. Below, the lights were flickering to life, promising another night of revelry and vice in this glittering den of Prohibition defiance. It had been mere days since his arrival, but already the city pulsed with potential, a far cry from the soot-choked streets of Birmingham. Inside the suite, Nucky Thompson paced the Persian rug, his tailored suit impeccable, a glass of illicit scotch in hand. The room was a testament to old-world luxury, crystal decanters on mahogany sideboards, heavy velvet curtains framing the view of the Atlantic. Nucky's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, flicked toward Tommy as he entered from the balcony, flicking ash into a tray. "You're a man who keeps his word, Shelby," Nucky said, his voice smooth with a hint of Jersey grit. "That little test run with the Irish boys? Clean as a whistle. No bodies, no noise." "I like that." Tommy nodded, settling into a leather armchair, his cap tilted just so. "Precision's our trade, Mr. Thompson. The Peaky blinders don't leave loose ends. Now, about that partnership." Nucky stopped pacing and leaned against the desk, swirling his drink. "Straight to business. I respect that. You've got the roots from across the pond and I've got the keys to the kingdom here. But smuggling's a delicate dance. One wrong step, and the feds or the rivals come crashing in." They spent the next hour mapping it out on a worn nautical chart spread across the table, ink lines tracing paths from Canadian distilleries through hidden inlets along the Jersey shore to the teeming markets of New York. Tommy's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Leverage the Shelby family's established contacts in Liverpool and Glasgow for transatlantic shipments, but for the American leg, tap into Canadian whiskey flowing south like a river of liquid gold. Atlantic City would be the gateway, its docks under Nucky's thumb, funneling the booze to speakeasies and high rollers up the coast. "We'll use your political pull to grease the wheels," Tommy said, tapping a spot on the map marked with a discreet red pin, Nucky's network of bribed customs agents and harbor masters. "Keep the Coast Guard looking the other way. My boys handle the loading and unloading. Fast, quiet, like ghosts." Nucky chuckled, but there was steel in it. "And what do you bring besides ghosts, Shelby?" "I've got politicians in my pocket from here to Washington. But the streets? That's where the real wars are fought." "Manpower," Tommy replied evenly. "Trained men who know how to move cargo without a whisper. And routes that dodge the patrols. In return, we split the profits 60-40. Your territory, your call on the take." Nucky's brow arched. 50-50. "This ain't charity." Tommy met his gaze, unblinking. 50-50 it is. But I want access to your distributors in New York. No middlemen skimming off the top. A long pause stretched between them, broken only by the faint jazz riff drifting up from the street. Finally, Nucky extended a hand. "Deal dot. I doubt Wayne. We start small. First shipment comes in from Windsor next week. Prove it works, and we scale up." The handshake was firm, sealing the pact in the dim glow of the chandelier. But as Tommy watched Nucky pour another round, he noted the subtle tension in the man's shoulders, the way his eyes darted to the door every few minutes. Trust was a currency in short supply here, and Tommy intended to spend it wisely. The first operation launched under a moonless sky 3 nights later. Tommy's ship, the Grey Ghost, a sleek vessel disguised as a fishing trawler, slipped into the Absecon Inlet just after midnight. Aboard were a dozen Peaky blinders, their razor-capped heads bowed low as they hauled crates stamped with innocuous tea labels. The cargo? Fine Canadian rye, potent enough to fell a horse and sweet enough to turn a profit. Nucky's men waited on the docks, shadows among the pilings. Directed by Eli Thompson, Nucky's brother and enforcer. Eli was a bulldog of a man, broad-shouldered and suspicious, his fedora pulled low over a scarred face. "Your Brits better not fuck this up," he growled as Tommy oversaw the transfer. "Watch and learn," Tommy said coolly, signaling his crew. In under 20 minutes, the liquor was afloated into waiting trucks, tires muffled with rags to hush the rumble. Nucky's political strings ensured the night watchman was conveniently absent, and a forged manifest listed the crates as machinery parts for a Philadelphia factory. By dawn, the shipment had vanished into the night, bound for a warehouse in Egg Harbor where it would be cut and bottled before hitting New York. Tommy wired the take to Birmingham that afternoon. Clean, on time, and double the expected haul. Nucky, informed via a trusted runner, cracked a rare smile at his desk in the Atlantic City Commissioner's office. "Thompson," the messenger panted, handing over the ledger. Shelby's boys moved like smoke. Not a ripple. Nucky leaned back, lighting a cigar. "Good. D. Tell Eli to shadow them on the next one. I want eyes on every crate." The successes piled up like stacks of greenbacks. The second run evaded a random Coast Guard sweep, thanks to Nucky's tip from a senator's aide, and netted enough to line both men's pockets. Tommy's precision shone in the details. Decoy boats drawing patrols away, encrypted telegrams coordinating drops. Nucky's connections turned potential disasters into triumphs. A nosy federal agent was reassigned to Ohio after a quiet word from the right congressman. Word spread through the underworld like wildfire. Minor rivals, scrappy outfits from Philly and the Pine Barrens, tried to muscle in, ambushing a supply convoy on the outskirts of Atlantic City. But Tommy's blinders were ready. From a hilltop vantage, they spotted the interlopers' rumble seats glinting in the dusk. A single burst from a hidden Tommy gun scattered the attackers, leaving two twitching in the dirt and the rest fleeing into the marshes. Nucky heard the report over breakfast at the Claridge Hotel, buttering his toast with satisfaction. "Shelby's got teeth," he murmured to Eli, who sat across from him, nursing a coffee. "But teeth can bite the hand that feeds." Eli grunted. "He's too smooth, Nuck. Those English eyes, always calculating. You sure about this alliance?" Nucky's fork paused midair. "Sure as sin. But alliances are like dames. Fun while they last, treacherous when they turn. Keep tabs on him. Use Chalky. He's got no love for outsiders." Chalky White, Nucky's liaison to the colored speakeasies, was a towering figure with a voice like gravel and loyalties forged in fire. That evening, as Tommy concluded a deal with a Boardwalk contact, a wiry Italian named Luciano, who ran hooch to the Jersey Flats, Chalky lingered in the shadows of a nearby arcade, his fedora blending with the evening crowd. Tommy sensed the tale almost immediately. As he strolled the boardwalk, the neon signs buzzing overhead, steel piers divers plunging into illuminated pools, the scent of saltwater taffy mingling with cigar smoke. He caught the reflection in a funhouse mirror, a broad-shouldered man, keeping pace but not too close. Back at the Ritz, Tommy poured himself a whiskey. Irish this time, a nod to old wounds, and considered his next move. The partnership was blooming, coffers filling, but Nucky's wariness was palpable. Tommy needed leverage, something to tip the scales if the alliance soured. He started small, casual probes over shared meals. At a private dinner in Nucky's suite, amid platters of oysters and roast beef, Tommy steered the conversation. "Impressive network you've built, mister?" Thompson. Day. Must take a fortune in bribes to keep the politicians smiling. Nucky speared an oyster, his eyes twinkling. "Fortune's the wrong word, Shelby. It's an investment. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. But some backs have scars, old rivals, like that Commodore fella who thought he owned this town. Tommy filed it away. The Commodore, a ghost from Nucky's past, whispered about in dives as the man who'd ruled Atlantic City before the war. Weakness. Or just history. He pressed gently. Sounds like you've outlasted him. But ghosts linger. Ever worry about unfinished business? Nucky's laugh was short. Worries for amateurs. I handle my business. But Tommy saw the flicker. A tightening of the jaw. A glance at Eli standing sentinel by the door. Nucky's empire rested on those political ties, but they were threads that could fray. Tommy made a mental note to have Arthur dig into the Commodore's remnants during the next transatlantic wire. Meanwhile, Nucky's surveillance deepened. Shalky reported back after tailing Tommy to a clandestine meeting with a Canadian contact in a back alley speakeasy off the boardwalk. The place was a haze of smoke and saxophone wails, patrons nursing gin rickeys under dim red lights. He's cozying up to the Canucks, Chalky said later. In Nucky's office, the sea crashing outside like applause. Talking routes that bypass our docks. Smells like he's building his own ladder. Nucky drummed his fingers on the desk. Or testing the waters. Keep watching. If he steps out of line, we clip his wings. The third shipment was their boldest yet. A double load from Quebec, slipped through the St. Lawrence and down the coast under cover of fog. Tommy's blinders manned the helm, navigating by stars and instinct, while Nucky's insiders cleared the path. A lighthouse keeper paid to dim his beam. Patrol boats rerouted by a tampered schedule. It arrived without a hitch, crates unloaded in the pre-dawn hush of the inlet. The take was staggering. Thousands in cash from New York buyers, eager for the pure stuff untainted by bathtub swill. Tommy and Nucky met at a neutral spot, a seaside casino where roulette wheels spun eternally to split the spoils. Here's to empires, Nucky toasted, clinking glasses in a private booth overlooking the waves. Tommy raised his, but his mind was elsewhere, tracing the cracks in Nucky's facade. To empires that last. As the night wore on, with jazz filtering through the walls and the scent of fortune in the air, the alliance solidified. Rivals scattered, profits soared, trust, in its fragile form, grew. Yet beneath the surface, currents stirred. Tommy's probes grew sharper, Nucky's watchmen closer. In the neon glow of Atlantic City, the pact forged in ambition was already shadowed by the specter of betrayal. The boardwalk lights twinkled like distant stars as Tommy stepped out into the cool night, Chalky's shadow trailing at a discreet distance. The game was afoot, and Tommy Shelby played to win. Chapter 4. Whispers of Ambition. The salt-laced breeze off the Atlantic carried the faint hum of distant waves crashing against the pilings beneath the boardwalk. But Tommy Shelby's mind was far from the ocean's rhythm. It had been 3 months since the alliance with Nucky Thompson took root, and the shipments had indeed multiplied like weeds in a neglected garden. What started as tentative runs from the Canadian border through Atlantic City's hidden coves had swelled into a steady torrent of illicit liquor flowing south to the parched throats of New York and beyond. Tommy's ship, the Peaky Dawn, now docked regularly under the cover of night, unloading crates of fine Scottish and Irish whiskey that bore false labels proclaiming them as harmless Canadian ale. The Peaky Blinder's precision, each man moving like a shadow, silent and lethal, meshed seamlessly with Nucky's network of bribed customs officials and corrupt dock workers. Tommy stood on the weathered pier of one of Nucky's lesser-known warehouses, a squat brick building tucked behind a row of fishmongers on the edge of town. The air reeked of brine and tar, mingled with the sharp tang of whiskey seeping from a cracked barrel. His flat cap sat low over his piercing blue eyes, a cigarette dangling from his lips as he watched his men, hardened brummies shipped over from Birmingham, stack crates with mechanical efficiency. Arthur, his brother, barked orders in a low growl, his razor-capped presence a deterrent to any idle hands. "Another load in by dawn," Arthur said, wiping sweat from his brow with a grimy sleeve. "Nucky's boys say the New York buyers are lapping it up. We're making more in a month than we did in a year back home." Tommy exhaled a plume of smoke, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the lights of the boardwalk flickered like distant fireflies. Aye, and that's just the start. But even as the words left his mouth, his thoughts turned to the undercurrents beneath the alliance. Nucky's grip on Atlantic City was ironclad, but his reach into New York was a web of loyalties that Tommy had been quietly unraveling. During the joint runs, he'd made note of the distributors, sharp-eyed men in tailored suits who met the shipments at shadowed rail depots, their trucks vanishing into the night toward speakeasies and private clubs. Names like Mickey Doyle and the Rosen brothers surfaced in hushed conversations, men who owed their empires to Nucky's benevolence, but whose greed could be tempted. That very afternoon, Tommy had slipped away from the warehouse under the pretense of scouting new routes. In a dimly lit back room of a Hell's Kitchen saloon, far from prying eyes, he'd sat across from Mickey Doyle. The Irishman was a burly figure with a face like weathered oak, his fingers thick with gold rings that caught the lamplight as he nursed a tumbler of Nucky's finest. "You're a long way from Birmingham, Shelby," Mickey had said, his brogue thick as the foam on his pint. "What brings the Peaky blinders sniffing around my door?" Tommy leaned forward, his voice a measured drawl. "Opportunity. Nucky's got the dock sewn up, but the roads to New York? They're clogged with middlemen taking their cut. I can get you direct from the source. Cleaner runs, better prices. No need to share with the Boardwalk King." Mickey's eyes narrowed, suspicion warring with avarice. "And what does Nucky think of this little chat?" "He doesn't need to know." "Not yet." Tommy slid a small vial of whiskey samples across the table. Pure, unadulterated stock that would make any bootlegger's mouth water. "Think on it. The Shelbys don't do business halfway." By the time Tommy returned to Atlantic City, the seed was planted. Over the following weeks, similar meetings unfolded in the shadows. A whispered deal with the Rosen brothers at a boxing match in Jersey. A late-night telegram to a contact in Brighton Beach, promising exclusive routes. Each siphoned a sliver of business away from Nucky's loyalists, funneling profits directly into Shelby coffers. The alliance held on the surface. Joint shipments continued without a hitch. But Tommy's web was spinning, thread by invisible thread. Nucky Thompson, however, was no fool. From his penthouse suite in the Ritz-Carlton, he surveyed his domain like a hawk, eyeing the horizon for storm clouds. The past month had brought whispers to his ears, carried on the lips of informants embedded in every corner of the underworld. Dock workers grumbled about discrepancies in the ledgers. New York contacts complained of fluctuating supplies, and his trusted lieutenant, Eddie Kessler, had reported unusual activity around the rail yards. "It's the Englishman," Eddie said one evening, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the glittering boardwalk. The sun dipped low, painting the ocean in hues of blood and gold. Nucky swirled the amber liquid in his glass, the ice clinking softly. "Shelby's men have been seen in New York without our oversight. Mickey Doyle's been cagey on the phone, says shipments are irregular." Nucky's jaw tightened, his politician's smile fading into a mask of calculation. Tommy Shelby was a wild card, a man whose calm demeanor hid the blade of ambition. The alliance had been profitable, yes, but Nucky had built his empire on control, not shared thrones. If Shelby was nibbling at the edges, it was time to shore up the flanks. "Reach out to the Irish," Nucky instructed, his voice steady as steel. "Tell Lucky Luciano with the Italians that there's a new player stirring the pot. The Shelbys are British interlopers, ruthless, but isolated. If they push too far, we make sure they're the ones who end up floating face down in the Hudson." Eddie nodded, slipping away to make the calls. Within days, tendrils of alliance extended from Nucky's grasp. In a smoke-filled room above a Five Points gambling den, he met with Oni Madden, the Irish mob's rising star, whose eyes gleamed with the promise of expanded territory. "The Brits think they can waltz in and take a slice," Nucky said, pouring generous measures of scotch. "But Atlantic City's mine. Help me clip their wings, and there's plenty in it for you. Routes, protection, the works." Woonie leaned back, his Dublin accent sharp. "Aye, but Shelby's no pushover. Heard they carve up faces with them razor caps." "What's the play?" Watch, Dwayne. Wait. And when the moment comes, strike. Nucky's words hung in the air like gunsmoke. Similar overtures went to the Italians. Subtle positioning of the Peaky blinders as threats to the fragile peace, painting Tommy as a disruptor who needed neutralizing before he upset the balance. As autumn deepened, the shipments continued to flow, but the undercurrents grew treacherous. Tommy felt the shift, a prickle at the back of his neck during meetings with Nucky, where the older man's smile seemed a touch too tight, his questions a fraction too probing. Yet neither man voiced the suspicions outright. The profits were too rich, the risks of open war too high. The breaking point simmered to the surface at the annual Harvest Gala, a lavish affair thrown by the Atlantic City elite in the opulent ballroom of the Claridge Hotel. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto polished marble floors, and the air thrummed with the brassy wail of a jazz orchestra. Prohibition be damned! Tables groaned under veiled decanters of smuggled champagne, the bubbles rising like secrets waiting to burst. Politicians in tuxedos mingled with bootleggers in silk ties, their laughter a brittle facade over the underworld's machinations. Tommy arrived fashionably late, his tailored suit a nod to the occasion, though the flat cap remained firmly in place, a defiant emblem of his roots. Grace, his wife, clung to his arm, her emerald gown shimmering like the sea at dusk. She'd come over from England to lend legitimacy to his American venture, but her eyes darted warily through the crowd, sensing the tension that Tommy wore like a second skin. Nucky held court near the grand piano, surrounded by a coterie of admirers. His wife, Margaret, radiant in pearls, played the perfect hostess, but Nucky's gaze locked onto Tommy the moment he entered. "Shelby," he called, raising a flute of champagne in mock toast. "Glad you could make it. The night's not the same without our transatlantic friends." Tommy approached, Grace at his side, accepting a glass from a passing tray. The champagne was crisp, forbidden nectar that burned pleasantly down his throat. "Wouldn't miss it, Nucky. Your city's hospitality is unmatched." Wow. The two men clinked glasses, but the sound was sharp, like the cocking of a hammer. Around them, the party swirled. Women in flapper dresses twirling to the saxophone's lament, men sealing deals in shadowed alcoves. Yet beneath the glamour, eyes watched. Hetty's subtle nod to a group of Irish enforcers by the bar. Arthur's wary scan of the Italian suits clustered near the exits. As the evening wore on, Tommy drifted into conversation with a New York distributor, a weasel-faced man named Sal, who owed allegiance to the Rosen brothers. Over glasses refilled thrice, Tommy murmured promises of premium stock, his words laced with the allure of independence. "No more waiting on Atlantic City's whims," he said softly. "Direct from the source." Sal's eyes flickered toward Nucky across the room, but greed won out. "Maybe, but it's risky." Across the ballroom, Nucky observed the exchange, his fingers tightening around his stemware. He sidled up to Ani Madden, who nursed a whiskey neat. "See that? Shelby's already poaching. Time to remind him where the power lies." Ani grinned, teeth flashing white. "Leave it to me. A word in the right ears, and those blinders'll find their caps don't cut as deep in our waters." The orchestra struck up a sultry rendition of Rhapsody in Blue, and couples took to the floor. Tommy danced with Grace, her head on his shoulder, but his eyes never left Nucky. Later, as the party peaked in a haze of laughter and cigar smoke, the two leaders found themselves alone at a high-top table, the city's elite a blurred backdrop. "You're playing a dangerous game, Tommy," Nucky said quietly, his voice cutting through the din like a knife. He swirled his champagne, the bubbles mirroring the turmoil in his eyes. "New York's a big apple, but it has worms. Loyal ones." Tommy met his stare, unflinching. "Loyalty's a funny thing, Nucky. Costs a pretty penny, but it's cheap when the offer's better." He took a slow sip, the champagne tasting of victory and peril. "Our partnership's been golden. Let's keep it that way." Nucky's laugh was low, without mirth. "Gold tarnishes, Shelby, and when it does, Empires fall. He raised his glass again, but this time, the toast felt like a warning. Around them, the party continued, jazz weaving through the air. But the whispers of ambition had taken root, coiling like smoke from a hidden fuse. As Tommy escorted Grace toward the exit, the weight of unspoken threats lingered. Arthur fell in step behind them, his hand twitching toward his pocket where the razor waited. The alliance teetered, and in the neon glow of the boardwalk outside, the shadows seemed longer, hungrier. Chapter 5. The First Betrayal. The salt-laced wind whipped across the moonlit waters of the Delaware Bay, carrying the faint hum of distant jazz from Atlantic City's boardwalk. Tommy Shelby stood at the prow of the battered fishing trawler, his cap pulled low over his piercing blue eyes, a cigarette dangling from his lips. The shipment below decks was a prize, 200 cases of prime Scottish whiskey, smuggled straight from Birmingham's hidden distilleries. But this wasn't headed for Nucky Thompson's warehouses. No, this load was destined for Mickey Doyle, the scrappy Irish bootlegger who'd been whispering in Tommy's ear about better cuts and fewer questions asked. Tommy exhaled a plume of smoke, watching the dark horizon for any sign of trouble. Arthur had warned him about going behind Nucky's back so soon, but Tommy knew the game. Alliances were temporary. Empires were built on quiet conquests. The Peaky blinders were already threading their way into New York's veins. Why let Nucky monopolize the flow? A few side deals and Tommy could carve out his own slice of the American pie. The trawler's engine chugged steadily. The deckhands, hardened Brummies shipped over from England, busying themselves with ropes and crates. Finn, Tommy's young cousin, paced nearby, his hand twitching toward the holstered Webley under his coat. "You sure about this, Tom? Nucky's got eyes everywhere." Tommy's gaze didn't waver. Eyes don't see what they don't know to look for. He flicked his cigarette into the waves. The rendezvous point was a secluded inlet just north of Atlantic City, away from the guarded docks. Mickey's boys would meet them with trucks, and by dawn, the whiskey would be flooding rival speakeasies, undercutting Nucky's prices by a healthy margin. But as the trawler rounded the headland, a shadow detached from the darkness, a sleek speedboat cutting through the water like a knife. Searchlights pierced the night, sweeping the deck. Tommy's stomach tightened. "Finn, get below. Tell the lads to arm up." Shouts erupted from the boat, harsh American accents barking orders. "Cut the engine. This is Thompson's territory." Tommy raised his hand slowly, stepping forward into the light. Nucky's men. How the hell had they known? The speedboat pulled alongside, grappling hooks latching onto the trawler's rail. Armed thugs clambered aboard, led by a burly enforcer with a scarred face and a Thompson submachine gun slung over his shoulder. "Captain Shelby, I presume. Nucky sends his regards." The fight was quick and brutal. One of Tommy's men reached for a hidden pistol, and the night exploded in gunfire. Bullets ricocheted off the iron deck, splintering wood and shattering lanterns. Finn took a graze to the arm, cursing as he fired back, dropping one of Nucky's goons into the drink. But they were outnumbered, outgunned. Tommy barked orders, his voice steady amid the chaos. No kills, waste of good hands. But hold the cargo. It was no use. The enforcer's men swarmed the hold, smashing open crates and pouring whiskey into the bay like it was river water. The acrid scent of spilled liquor mixed with gunpowder, turning Tommy's stomach. By the time the shooting stopped, half the shipment was ruined, and the rest was being loaded onto the speedboat. The scarred leader approached Tommy, who stood bloodied but unbowed, a fresh cut above his eye. "Nucky figured you Brits might try something clever. Said to tell you, partnerships are two-way streets. Cross it, and you'll find the other side's a graveyard." Tommy wiped the blood from his face, his mind racing. Someone had talked. Mickey? One of his own? "Tell Nucky the Peaky blinders don't forget a slight. But we'll talk business like gentlemen." The man laughed, a guttural sound. "Gentlemen? In this town? Dream on, lie-me-die." They shoved off, leaving the trawler adrift, its crew nursing wounds and simmering rage. Back in Atlantic City, Dawn broke over the boardwalk like a hangover, the neon signs flickering off one by one. Tommy paced the cramped room of his suite at the Claridge Hotel, a tumbler of surviving whiskey in hand. Arthur burst in, face like thunder, Polly trailing behind with her sharp eyes scanning for threats. "They took the lot, Tom," Arthur growled, slamming a fist on the table. "Mickey's boys never showed. That Irish bastard sold us out." Polly lit a cigarette, her voice calm but laced with steel. "Or Nucky's got his hooks in deeper than we thought. You poked the bear, Tommy. Now it's biting back." Word came by noon. Nucky's men had sealed the docks. No Shelby ships in or out without his say-so. Truck access? Denied. The alliance so carefully forged was cracking under the weight of suspicion. Tommy's undercutting schemes, secret deals with New York distributors, rerouted Canadian runs, were exposed, and Nucky was closing the noose. "We adapt," Tommy said, staring out at the crashing waves. "No docks? We'll use the back channels. The marshes, the back bays. Riskier, but quieter." He turned to Arthur. "Get the lads ready. We're running a test shipment tonight, straight to Doyle's warehouse in Philly. Prove we don't need Thompson's charity." Arthur nodded, though doubt flickered in his eyes. "And if it's a trap?" Tommy's smile was cold. "Then we spring it first." Dusk fell heavy on the Jersey shore, the air thick with the buzz of mosquitoes and the distant roar of the ocean. Tommy's crew loaded a smaller haul, 50 cases of gin this time, onto a flat-bottomed skiff, navigating the twisting inlets of the great Egg Harbor River. No engines. They poled through the shallows, silent as ghosts under the cover of mangroves. Leading the way was Isaiah Jesus, a sharp-eyed Peaky blinder with a knack for these watery mazes, his razor cap glinting faintly in the starlight. The route was a gamble. Narrow waterways riddled with sandbars, far from the patrolled coasts but exposed to anyone who knew the lay of the land. Tommy sat at the tiller, map spread on his knees, calculating risks. Eyes open, he murmured. Irish have been sniffing around since we cut into their rum trade. The ambush came without warning. As the skiff rounded a bend, shadows erupted from the reeds. Figures in dark coats, wielding shotguns and clubs. Irish enforcers, their accents thick as peat. "Shelby scum? This river's ours tonight." The first blast shattered the quiet, pellets shredding the skiff's side. Water rushed in as Tommy dove for cover, drawing his pistol. Chaos reigned. Arthur roared, firing wildly and dropping a masked attacker into the muck. Finn scrambled to protect the crates, but a burly Irishman clubbed him down, blood blooming on his shirt. Tommy rolled behind a crate, bullets whizzing past. "Form up. Protect the load." He squeezed off shots, precise and deadly. 2 enforcers crumpled, clutching their throats. But there were too many, emerging from the fog like wraiths. Isaiah took a slug to the leg, howling as he fired back. The skiff listed, gin cases splintering and spilling into the river, the sharp scent cutting through the gunsmoke. In the melee, Tommy locked eyes with their leader, a gaunt man with a scarred cheek and eyes burning with old grudges. "Thompson sends his regards. Shelby, you're done in this town." "Nucky?" No. This reeked of the Irish mob, but the words twisted the knife. Had Nucky orchestrated this to teach a lesson? Tommy's rage fueled him. He lunged forward, tackling the leader into the shallow water. They grappled, fists flying, the man's knife flashing. Tommy dodged, countering with a brutal headbutt that split the Irishman's brow. "Tell your boss the Peaky blinders cut deeper than knives." The fight turned the tide, literally, as the skiff sank, forcing both sides into the knee-deep marsh. Hand to hand now, grunts and splashes echoing. Arthur waded in like a berserker, cracking skulls with his bare hands. But losses mounted. 2 blinders down, drowning in the mud. Isaiah dragged to safety, his leg a ruin. The Irish broke first, melting back into the reeds as sirens wailed in the distance. Cops, or Nucky's cleanup crew. Tommy hauled Finn aboard a salvaged rowboat, the survivors paddling to shore with what cargo they could save. Barely a dozen cases made it, soaked and battered. The ambush had cost them blood and pride. Limping into Atlantic City under cover of night, Tommy's crew dispersed to safe houses. He cleaned his wounds in the hotel bathroom, the mirror reflecting a man forged in Birmingham's fires, now tempered by American deceit. Polly stitched Finn's gash, her hands steady. "This ends tonight, Tommy. Confront him, or we'll bleed out here." Tommy nodded, donning his best suit, crisp wool, bloodstains hidden. The Ritz-Carlton loomed like a gilded cage, its lobby buzzing with oblivious revelers. Nucky's suite was on the top floor, guarded by stone-faced wardens. Tommy strode past them, his presence commanding respect, laced with fear. The door opened to reveal Nucky Thompson, impeccably dressed in a silk robe, a cigar between his manicured fingers. The room smelled of expensive cologne and aged bourbon. Eli, Nucky's brother and sheriff, lounged in the corner, hand near his gun. "Tommy Shelby," Nucky drawled, a smile not reaching his eyes. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Heard you had a rough night on the water." Tommy stepped inside, closing the door with a soft click. "Rough? Try bloody. Your Irish friends nearly drowned my operation." Nucky's brow arched. "My friends? The Doyles are wild cards, Tommy. I had nothing to do with that mess." He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, irony not lost, and offered one. "But let's talk about yours. That little side run to Mickey? Bold move." "I don't like bold without my say." Tommy accepted the glass but didn't drink, his eyes locked on Nucky's. "Intercepted my shipment last night." "Coincidence?" "Business," Nucky replied coolly. "You were undercutting me with my own buyers." "Can't have that." "Docks are closed until we sort this." "And the ambush?" "Risky routes because of you and your friends waiting." Eli shifted, tense. Nucky leaned forward, voice low. "If I wanted you dead, you'd be feeding the fishes already. Irish are opportunists. Saw weakness, struck. Blame your schemes, not me." Tommy circled the room, tension crackling like static. His hand hovered near his pocket pistol, mirrored by Eli's move. "I built empires on less trust than this. But lies cost lives. My men died tonight." Nucky stood, meeting Tommy's gaze levelly. "And mine could have, if I'd let that whiskey flood the streets without me. We're partners, Shelby. Fragile, sure, but profitable. Call off your dogs, stick to our deal, and the docks reopen. Cross me again, and it's war." The words hung heavy, accusations unspoken but felt. Tommy waited. Push now, risk everything. Pull back, live to scheme another day. The alliance was a powder keg, but neither wanted to light the fuse yet. "Agreed," Tommy said finally, clinking his glass against Nucky's untouched one. "For now. But remember, Peaky blinders don't forgive debts." Nucky's smile returned, thin and calculating. "Neither do I, Tommy. Welcome to America." As Tommy left the suite, the boardwalk lights twinkled below, a facade of glamour hiding the shadows. The partnership teetered, preserved by mutual wariness, but the first betrayal had drawn blood. And in this game, blood called for more. Chapter 6. Shadows on the docks. The salt-laden wind whipped across the Atlantic City docks as Tommy Shelby stood at the edge of the pier, his cap pulled low against the relentless drizzle. It was late October 1923, and the air carried the bite of coming winter, mingling with the acrid scent of tar and diesel from the ships moored nearby. Tommy's mind was a storm of its own, replaying the ambush from weeks earlier. The Irish enforcer's bullets tearing through his men like paper. The narrow escape that left him with a scar snaking down his forearm. Nucky Thompson's denials rang hollow in his ears. The partnership was fraying, thread by thread, and Tommy knew it was time to reinforce his position. He lit a cigarette, the flame flickering in the gloom, and exhaled a plume of smoke that twisted toward the dark horizon. Back in Birmingham, the Peaky blinders were his unyielding backbone, forged in the fires of war and street wars. Here, in this glittering den of American vice, he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. No more. He'd wired Arthur last night. Send the boys. We need muscle. Bell. The response had been swift. John, Isaiah, and a dozen hardened lads would sail on the next freighter, disguised as laborers. They were due any day now, and Tommy felt a grim anticipation settle in his gut. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, not with Nucky's eyes everywhere. Across town, in the opulent confines of the Ritz-Carlton, Nucky Thompson paced the Persian rug in his suite, a crystal tumbler of scotch in hand. The liquor burned smooth, a rare Canadian blend smuggled through his own networks. But it did little to ease the knot of suspicion tightening in his chest. Tommy Shelby was a viper. That much was clear. Slippery, calculating with a gaze that stripped you bare. The botched shipment, the whispers of side deals in New York. It all pointed to the Brit undercutting him. Nucky wasn't one to wait for betrayal to strike. He needed leverage. The kind that came from alliances woven through backroom deals and shared graft. He'd spent the morning in a smoke-filled chamber at City Hall, schmoozing with Mayor Bader and a cadre of aldermen. Promises of kickbacks from the next big liquor hall flowed as freely as the coffee. Nucky, you keep the bottles flowing, and we'll keep the Federals blind, the mayor had chuckled, pocketing an envelope thick with bills. But politics were just the facade. The real power lay in the shadows, with the families who controlled the streets. By afternoon, Nucky was ensconced in a dimly lit booth at a speakeasy off the boardwalk, the air thick with cigar smoke and the low murmur of deals being struck. Across from him sat Salvatore Maranzano, the rising star of the Italian syndicate, his face a mask of olive-skinned calculation, flanked by two stone-faced goons. "Thompson," Maranzano said, his accent thick as olive oil. "You want our protection? Our trucks for your hooch? What's in it for us?" Nucky leaned forward, his voice a silken thread. "The Shelbys. That English prick's been sniffing around our New York roots. You help me watch him, and I'll cut you in on 20% of the Atlantic City take. No more middlemen." Maranzano's eyes gleamed. The Italians had long-eyed expansion, and the Peaky blinders were interlopers after all. A nod sealed it. Loose tongues would wag, alliances would tighten, and Nucky's web would ensnare the outsider tighter than ever. The joint operation was set for that very night. A high-stakes unload at Warehouse 17 on the industrial edge of the docks. Tommy had proposed it as a show of unity. A massive shipment from Canada, funneled through Nucky's political blind spots, to be distributed to thirsty speakeasies up the coast. 200 crates of prime rye whiskey, worth a fortune in this dry land. Tommy's men, Finn and a few locals he'd vetted, would handle the heavy lifting, while Nucky provided the trucks and a squad of his enforcers led by the hulking Eli Thompson, his brother. Tommy arrived first, his Hudson parked under the sodium lamps that cast long, jagged shadows across the weathered planks. The warehouse loomed like a forgotten beast, its corrugated iron walls groaning in the wind. He checked his watch, 11:15 p.m., right on time. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of damp wood and oiled machinery. Crates were already stacked in neat rows, the fruits of a midnight rendezvous with a fishing trawler out of Halifax. Eli lumbered in minutes later, his trench coat straining over broad shoulders, followed by 6 of Nucky's boys. Hard men with scarred knuckles and eyes that darted like rats. "Shelby," Eli grunted, spitting tobacco juice onto the floor. "Boss says make it quick. Fed's been sniffing around the pier." Tommy nodded, his expression impassive. "Efficiency is our trade, Mr. Thompson. Let's move." The work began in tense silence, crates hauled to the waiting trucks under the beam of handheld lanterns. Tommy directed his crew with clipped commands, his mind half on the labor, half on the shadows beyond the warehouse doors. Something felt off. The wind too still. The night too quiet. He slipped a hand into his coat, fingers brushing the Webley revolver holstered there. It hit like thunder. The side door exploded inward, splintered by a battering ram, and a hail of gunfire erupted from the darkness. Shouts in Italian pierced the chaos. Avanti! Take it all! As a dozen masked figures stormed in, Tommy guns blazing. Bullets ricocheted off metal beams, shattering crates and sending whiskey rivers pooling across the concrete. Tommy dove behind a stack of barrels, his heart pounding as he drew his pistol. Ambush! Get down! One of his men, young Mikey from Birmingham, caught a slug in the chest, crumpling without a sound. Eli roared, firing his shotgun into the fray, blasting an Italian off his feet in a spray of blood. Nucky's boys returned fire, but the attackers were relentless, coordinated, pouring lead into the warehouse like it was a sieve. Chaos reigned. Tommy popped up, squeezing off 2 shots that dropped a raider clutching a smoking Tommy gun. The acrid stench of gunpowder choked the air, mingling with the sharp tang of spilled liquor. An Italian gunman rounded the corner, eyes wild behind his mask, and Tommy met him with a point-blank blast to the face. But the tide was turning, more shadows poured in, and screams echoed as another of Eli's men went down, gut-shot and writhing. They're everywhere, Finn yelled, reloading frantically from cover. Tommy's mind raced. Italians. Not Irish this time. Who tipped them? The question fueled his rage as he crawled toward the rear exit, barking orders. Fall back! To the trucks! Eli was a whirlwind, his shotgun booming. But even he took a graze to the arm, cursing as blood soaked his sleeve. Bodies littered the floor. 3 of Nucky's, 2 of Tommy's, and at least 5 Italians. The raiders grabbed what crates they could, dragging them into the night. But the defenders held the line just enough to save half the haul. As suddenly as it began, the gunfire stuttered to a halt. The survivors, Tommy, Eli, Finn, and a handful of battered men, huddled in the dim light, breaths ragged, the warehouse a slaughterhouse of splintered wood and crimson stains. Sirens wailed in the distance, a harbinger of unwanted attention. Tommy stood first, wiping blood, someone else's, from his cheek. His eyes locked on Eli's. Your brother's contacts are thorough, almost too thorough. Eli snarled, clutching his wound. Watch your mouth, Limey. This smells like your side deal's gone sour. The drive to the rendezvous point was a grim procession. Tommy followed Eli's truck to a nondescript garage on the outskirts, where Nucky waited in the back office, nursing a cigar and a tumbler of bourbon. The room was sparse, a desk scarred by years of use, a single bulb swinging overhead, casting harsh shadows on Nucky's lined face. Eli burst in first, bloodied and furious, recounting the raid with vivid curses. Nucky's expression darkened as Tommy entered, closing the door with a deliberate click. Finn and a couple of others stood guard outside, but the air inside crackled with unspoken accusations. 8 dead, Nucky, Tommy said flatly, lighting a cigarette with steady hands. My men, yours. Italians walking off with our whiskey. Coincidence? Nucky stubbed out his cigar, rising slowly. His voice was calm, but his eyes were steel. Coincidence? In this business, nothing is. But if you're implying I set you up, Shelby, you've got more balls than brains. Those wops have been itching for a piece of my action for months. Tommy paced, the floorboards creaking under his boots. Your action. Your alliances. I hear you've been cozying up to Maranzano. What was it? Protection? Or a tip-off to draw blood? Eli stepped forward, fists clenched, but Nucky waved him down. Paranoia doesn't suit you, Tommy. We're bleeding men on both sides. If I wanted you gone, you'd be floating in the bay by now. He poured 2 glasses of bourbon, sliding one across the desk. Tommy ignored it. And if I wanted your roots, I'd have taken them already, Tommy countered, his Birmingham accent sharpening like a blade. But someone fed those Italians the time and place. You're a lieutenant? One of your politicians with loose lips? Nucky's jaw tightened. Or one of your Peaky boys, fresh off the boat, talking too loud in the wrong speakeasy. This alliance is hanging by a thread because of snakes like you, probing for weaknesses. The room fell silent, save for the distant hum of the city. Outside, the first rain of the night pattered against the tin roof. Tommy met Nucky's gaze, unblinking. Then let's cut the bullshit. We regroup. We hit back, together, or this ends in fire. Nucky considered, the bourbon untouched between them. Together, he echoed. But the word tasted like ash. The alliance teetered, accusations lingering like gunpowder smoke, and both men knew the next move could ignite the powder keg. Chapter 7. The Irish Gambit. The rain-slicked streets of Atlantic City gleamed under the sporadic glow of gas lamps, but the real shadows lurked in the back rooms of dimly lit speakeasies. Nucky Thompson sat in a corner booth at the Rusty Anchor, a dive favored by the Irish crew who ran the North End docks. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the bitter tang of cheap whiskey, a far cry from the opulent Ritz-Carlton where he usually held court. But tonight, discretion demanded the grit. Across from him slouched Declan O'Malley, the wiry Irishman with a scar twisting his lip into a perpetual sneer. O'Malley's eyes, sharp as broken glass, flicked over Nucky's tailored suit. So, the king of the boardwalk comes slumming. Must be important. Nucky leaned forward, his voice low and steady. It is. This British bastard, Tommy Shelby. He's worming his way into my operations like a rat in the walls. I need him clipped, but not by my hand. You do it clean, make it look like his own boys turned on him. Peaky blinders fighting among themselves. Internal dispute. Ow. No blowback on me. O'Malley chuckled, a wet rasp. And what's in it for the lads? We ain't charity. 20% of the next Canadian run through your docks. Plus, when Shelby's out, you get a piece of his English roots. No more scraping for scraps while he floods the market. The Irishman considered, swirling his drink. Around them, his men, burly dock workers with knuckles scarred from brawls, watched like wolves. Finally, O'Malley nodded. Done. Who are the targets? His lieutenants. Arthur Shelby, the hot-headed brother. Not and that quiet one, Finn. Make it look like a family squabble gone bad. Knives in the dark, no guns to draw heat. O'Malley grinned. We Irish know all about family disputes. It'll be poetic. Nucky stood, straightening his cufflinks. Poetic's fine, as long as it's final. And Declan, if it traces back, you're the one feeding the fish. As Nucky slipped out into the night, the deal was struck. The Irish would strike first, and the alliance with Shelby would bleed out quietly. Across town, in a cramped room above a shuttered tailor shop, Tommy Shelby nursed a cigarette, the smoke curling like ghosts in the lamplight. The raid on the warehouse last week still burned. Italians tipped off, good men dead, and Nucky's denials ringing hollow. Trust was a currency Tommy had long ago spent, but he needed eyes inside. The door creaked open, and in stepped Mickey Doyle, Nucky's sometime errand boy, now Tommy's reluctant double agent. Mickey was a weasel of a man, all nervous twitches and shifty eyes, but he'd proven useful before. Mr. Shelby, he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. You won't believe what I heard. Tommy's gaze pinned him. Out with it, Mickey. I ain't got all night. The man slid into a chair, voice a hurried murmur. Nucky's in bed with the Irish. O'Malley and his crew. .1. They're coming for your brothers, Arthur and the kid, Finn. Gonna make it look like Peaky and fightin'. Lades no bangin', so it don't wake the feds. Tommy's face remained a mask, but inside, the gears turned cold. Arthur, with his volatile temper, and young Finn, still green but loyal. These were the threads holding his American venture together. Nucky was playing for keeps. When? 2 nights from now. Ambush at the docks after the midnight unload. They think you're blind. Tommy exhaled smoke, calculating. You're sure? Mickey nodded frantically. Swear on me mother's grave. Nucky's paying 'em fat to carve up your boys and pin it on old grudges from Birmingham. Good. Geddy, keep your ears open. And Mickey, tell no one else. Tommy slipped a roll of bills across the table. You're cut. Now go. Alone. Tommy crushed out his cigarette. Nucky wanted war. He'd get one, but on Tommy's terms. First, protect his own. He'd warn Arthur and Finn, double the watch. But retaliation? That would sting where it hurt. Nucky's precious Italian pipeline. The next evening, under a sky bruised with impending storm, Arthur Shelby paced the foggy pier, his flat cap pulled low. Bloody hell, Tommy. The Yanks want us dead? After all we've built? Tommy stood still as a statue, eyes on the churning Atlantic. Not all Yanks. Just one. We're moving the unload forward. No chances. Finn, younger and wirier, clutched a razor in his pocket. What about payback? We can't just sit. Tommy's smile was a razor edge. Oh, we'll pay. Tonight. As the Peaky blinders melted into the shadows, slipping away unseen, the Irish waited in vain. O'Malley's men prowled the empty docks, cursing the no-show. Word spread quick. Internal beef or cold feet. But Nucky's patience frayed when Declan reported the miss. What do you mean they didn't show? Nucky barked into the telephone from his office at the Ritz, the line crackling like his temper. Ghosts Nucky vanished. Either they smelled it or turned on each other already. Nucky slammed the receiver, pouring a tumbler of scotch. Failure wasn't an option, but Tommy's evasion only hardened his resolve. Meanwhile, Tommy's retaliation brewed in the underbelly of the city. John Shelby, another brother fresh off the boat from England, led a small crew to the Italian warehouse on the edge of town. The Masseria family, tied tight to Nucky's web, stored crates of olive oil-laced hooch there, prime for sabotage. Under cover of dusk, John's men jimmied the locks, slipping inside like smoke. The air reeked of brine and aged wood. Quick now, John growled, his Birmingham accent thick. Wire the charges, douse the rest in petrol. They worked fast, rigging dynamite to the support beams, then splashing accelerant over the stacked barrels. A match would turn Nucky's golden goose to ash. One lookout, a burly Italian with a mustache like a broom, stirred from his doze. Who's there? Men, he called, fumbling for his piece. John lunged, razor flashing, silencing him with a slash across the throat. Blood sprayed, warm and metallic. Hurry! The crew lit the fuse, a hissing promise, and bolted into the night. The explosion ripped through the warehouse like thunder, flames licking skyward, devouring crates and illusions of security. Sirens wailed as the fire brigade raced in, but the damage was done. Thousands in liquor reduced to cinders, Nucky's Italian allies howling for blood. By dawn, the news hit Nucky like a gut punch. He stormed into a meeting with his lieutenants, face thunderous. Shelby Arnold, Nisha, Yare, 9 years or more suggest. It has to be. Those Birmingham bastards torched the Masseria stash. Eddie Kessler, his ever-loyal aide, nodded gravely. The Irish hit came up empty, boss. Word is, Shelby's boys skipped town for the night. Nucky's fist clenched. Then, it's tit for tat. He wants to play dirty? I'll bury him. But Tommy wasn't done. Emboldened, he struck again that week, this time hitting a convoy of Nucky's trucks en route from the Canadian border. Peaky sharpshooters picked off the drivers from the tree line, spilling crates into the mud where border patrols could find them. Evidence of Nucky's overreach, planted for the feds to sniff. The sabotage escalated, a shadow war chipping away at both empires. Nucky's docks ran half-empty, profits evaporating like mist. Tommy's routes faced blockades from vengeful Irish, forcing detours that cost time and lives. The city simmered, whispers of war threading through jazz halls and back alleys. Minor players picked sides or fled, the boardwalk's glamour cracking under the strain. Finally, as thunderheads gathered over the Atlantic, Nucky sent word. A meeting, neutral ground, the old lighthouse at the city's edge. No entourages, just the two kings to hash it out. Tommy arrived first, rain lashing his coat, the storm's howl mirroring the chaos within. He lit a cigarette, sheltering under the crumbling eaves, eyes scanning the roiling sea. Nucky's car pulled up minutes later, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. He emerged, umbrella in hand, but ditched it to approach on foot, water streaming down his face. "You wanted this, Parley," Tommy said, voice cutting sharp. "Talk, thought I." Nucky stopped a few paces away, wind whipping his tie. "Your handiwork, Shelby." "The warehouse? The trucks?" Tommy exhaled smoke into the gale. "You sent the Irish for my brothers, framed as family dirt." Dutch sat away. "I know, Nucky. I have ears." Nucky's eyes narrowed. "Ears? You mean rats. Mickey, does it matter? You struck first. I struck to protect what's mine. You're bleeding me dry with side deals, cozying up to my distributors. This alliance was supposed to be ironclad." Tommy stepped closer, rain mingling with the tension. "Ironclad? You mean one-sided? Your politicians, your cops. I'm the one risking ships across the pond. But ambition's a two-way street. You fear I'll eclipse you." Lightning cracked, illuminating Nucky's scowl. "Eclipse? You're a visitor, Shelby. This is my city, my ocean. And yet, here we are, empires crumbling because neither trusts the other." Tommy flicked his cigarette into the surf. "The Irish failed. Your Italians burn. My roots choke. How long before the feds circle, or the real wolves, like Lansky or Capone?" "Pick the bones." Nucky wiped rain from his eyes. "Then what? More sabotage? We end up like the Delesios, corpses on the tide." Tommy's gaze was steel. "A truce. Pull back the dogs. No more games. But mark me, Nucky. If you cross me again, I'll take it all. Boardwalk, docks, your precious writs." The older man laughed bitterly. Thunder rumbling agreement. "Truce it is. For now. But trust? That's a luxury we've both lost." They stood there, soaked and unbowed, as the storm raged on. The partnership teetered, threads frayed but not snapped. Yet, in the distance, lightning forked, a jagged warning of battles still to come. Back in the heart of Atlantic City, the neon flickered uncertainly, casting long shadows over a city on the brink. Tommy returned to his men, orders clipped. "Stand down, but stay sharp." Arthur grumbled. Finn nodded solemnly, and John sharpened his blade with grim purpose. Nucky, retreating to his suite, poured a drink with trembling hands. Eddie hovered. "Boss, we letting him walk?" "For now," Nucky murmured, staring at the storm-lashed window. "But Shelby's a cancer. We'll cut it out soon enough." The night deepened, rain hammering like accusations, and the gambit hung unresolved. A powder keg awaiting the spark. Chapter 8. Neon Betrayals. The neon haze of Atlantic City clung to the night like a fever dream, its electric glow painting the boardwalk in shades of electric blue and crimson or. Tommy Shelby stood on the balcony of his suite at the Ritz-Carlton, a cigarette dangling from his lips, the smoke curling upward to mingle with the salty Atlantic breeze. Below, the revelers danced under the flickering lights, oblivious to the shadows lengthening in the underworld. It was late September 1925, and the air hummed with the urgency of autumn's decay, much like the partnership he had forged with Nucky Thompson. Tommy's mind was a razor, sharpened by weeks of calculated moves and near misses. The stormy confrontation just days ago had left their alliance frayed, threads of trust snapping one by one. Nucky's eyes had burned with suspicion during that rain-lashed meeting in the back room of a speakeasy, accusing Tommy of sabotage without proof, while Tommy had parried with his own veiled threats. But words were wind. Actions would carve the path forward. Tommy had decided. The New York market was the prize, a glittering vein of gold running through the veins of America's thirsty elite. He would seize it whole, leaving Nucky to choke on the scraps. Inside the suite, Arthur Shelby paced like a caged wolf, his flat cap askew, fists clenched. "This Yank's playing us for fools, Tommy. That warehouse raid last week, Italian bastards knew exactly where to hit. Nucky's pulling strings." "Easy, Arthur," Tommy murmured, stepping back into the room. He stubbed out his cigarette in a crystal ashtray, his blue eyes steady. "Nucky's no fool, but he's got cracks. Political ties bind him, but greed loosens them. We're gonna widen those cracks." John Shelby lounged on the velvet chaise, nursing a glass of scotch. Ironic, given their trade. "How? We've got the roots from England, but New York's locked up tighter than a nun's knickers. Nucky's distributors are loyal as dogs." Tommy smiled thinly, pulling a dossier from his coat pocket. Pages yellowed with age, scribbled notes in hurried ink. "Loyalty's a currency, John. And I've got the mint." Over the past month, Tommy had dispatched scouts to New York, burrowing into the city's underbelly like roots seeking water. Whispers from bribed informants painted a picture. Nucky's key allies: Sal Vitale, the Italian fence with a warehouse in Brooklyn; Mickey Doyle, the loudmouth Irish supplier from the docks; and Eli Thompson, Nucky's own brother, whose sheriff's badge shielded more than it enforced. The plan was audacious, a Peaky Blinders special. Plant evidence implicating Nucky in a federal sting. Forged ledgers showing kickbacks to Prohibition agents. Photographs of Nucky's men shaking hands with G-men in shadowed alleys. All fabricated with the precision of a Birmingham gunsmith. Tommy's man in New York, a wiry ex-con named Finn Macready, had already seeded the doubts. A whispered word here, a discovered document there, and the allies would turn, sniffing opportunity in betrayal. "Tomorrow night," Tommy said, voice low. "Vitale's got a meet at the Astoria. We slip in the package, make it look like Nucky's trying to cut him out. Mickey gets the photos next. Eli, he'll hear it from the streets." Arthur grinned, cracking his knuckles. "And when they come for Nucky's throat, we offer sanctuary. New routes, better cuts. The market's ours." As the brothers schemed into the night, across town in the opulent sprawl of Nucky Thompson's mansion overlooking the ocean, paranoia festered like an open wound. Nucky sat at his mahogany desk, a tumbler of Canadian rye in hand, the ice clinking like warning bells. The alliance with Shelby had soured faster than bootleg gin left in the sun. That stormy parley had confirmed it. The Brit was a viper, coiling for the strike. Reports from his lieutenant, Eddie Kessler, painted Shelby's moves in stark relief. Secret deals with New York bootleggers, Peaky Blinders reinforcements slipping into the city like ghosts. Nucky's fingers drummed the desk. He had built his empire on Atlantic City's Boardwalk, weaving politics and crime into an unbreakable web. Shelby threatened that. "He's after New York," Nucky muttered to the empty room. "The whole damn pie." Eddie entered quietly, hat in hand. "Boss, word from the Irish. They're itching to move if you give the nod." Nucky shook his head. Direct hits were messy. They invited retaliation. No, this called for subtlety. A knife in the dark. He had contacts in the Bureau of Prohibition, palms greased over years of favors. Leaking intelligence was child's play. Tip off the feds about a Shelby shipment, make it sound ironclad. Let the law do the dirty work, nearly clip Shelby's wings, and watch him squirm. "Get word to Agent Sawyer," Nucky instructed. "Shelby's bringing in a load tomorrow night. Docks at Weehawken. Plates from the Shelby Company. Routes through Canada. Make it hot." Eddie nodded, vanishing into the shadows. Nucky leaned back, savoring the rye. Let's see how the Peaky Blinders dance with the devil. Dawn broke gray and sullen over the Atlantic, but the city's pulse quickened as the day wore on. Tommy's plan unfolded with mechanical precision. By evening, Finn Macready had infiltrated Vitale's warehouse, a hulking Italian with a pencil mustache and a temper as short as his stature. The package, a satchel of forged documents and cash-stuffed envelopes, labeled with Nucky's monogram, slid into a crate of olive oil barrels, destined for Vital's eyes only. At the Astoria's back alley, under the thrum of jazz spilling from the ballroom, Finn made the drop. Vital's men hauled the crate inside, none the wiser. Hours later, as Vital pored over the ledgers by lamplight, his face darkened. Thompson's been skimming me? That son of a bitch! He smashed a glass, barking orders to his crew. Whispers spread like wildfire through Brooklyn's underworld. Nucky was double-dealing, cutting out his own. Mickey Doyle received his parcel at a dice game in a Hell's Kitchen dive. Grainy photos showing Nucky's enforcers pocketing bribes from feds. "Traitorous bastard," Mickey growled, his Irish lilt thick with rage. By midnight, he'd rallied his dockside boys, loyalty fracturing like cheap crystal. Eli Thompson heard the rumors over a phone call from a nervous informant. "Nucky's selling us out to the Brits? After all I've done?" Betrayal stung deepest from family. Eli's sheriff's star felt heavier that night. Tommy monitored it all from a shadowed booth in a midtown speakeasy, Arthur and John at his flanks. Reports trickled in, allies turning, fingers pointing at Nucky. The New York market teetered, ripe for the taking. "It's done," Tommy said, lighting a fresh cigarette. "They'll come to us begging." But Nucky's counterstrike was already in motion. Agent Harlan Sawyer, a gaunt man with a fedora pulled low, pored over the leaked intel in a dimly lit office in Washington Heights. "Shelby Company shipment. Weehawken docks. 2 a.m. Plates match. British registry. ... This is gold. By 1:30 a.m. Federal agents swarmed the Jersey waterfront, Tommy cars and unmarked sedans blending into the fog. Tommy himself oversaw the unload from the deck of the Shadowhawk, a sleek cutter smuggling crates of single malt under false hulls. Peaky Blinders lads, hardened Birmingham boys with razors in their caps, hauled the liquor with quiet efficiency. "Quiet now," Tommy hissed as a crate thudded. The night was still, save for the lap of waves. Then, headlights pierced the gloom. Tires screeched, shouts echoed. "Federal agents!" "Hands up!" Chaos erupted. Gunfire cracked the air, ricocheting off shipping containers. Tommy's men fired back, but the feds were prepared, their Tommy guns chattering like mechanical death. A Peaky blinder named Reggie took a bullet to the chest, crumpling into the water with a gurgle. Another young Billy caught lead in the leg, screaming as he dragged himself behind a pallet. Tommy dove for cover, heart pounding but mind clear. "Ambush! Fall back!" he signaled John, who lobbed a smoke bomb. Peaky ingenuity from the old war, clouding the dock in choking haze. Bullets whined through the fog. Tommy's crew scattered, crates abandoned. He sprinted for the escape boat, Arthur covering him with suppressing fire. A Fed clipped Arthur's shoulder, blood blooming on his shirt, but he roared on. "Go, Tommy! We got this!" Federals closed in, flashlights slicing the smoke. Tommy leapt into the skiff, engine roaring to life just as agents reached the pier. Bullets splashed the water. One grazed his arm, a hot sting. The boat cut through the waves, leaving the raid, and 2 dead Peaky blinders in its wake. Reggie and Billy, minor cogs in the machine, their ends a footnote in the escalating war. Dawn found Tommy patched up in a safe house on the outskirts of Atlantic City. Arm bandaged, fury simmering. Arthur nursed his wound nearby, cursing the Yanks. "Feds don't just stumble on us." "Nucky. ... Tommy nodded, eyes like flint. Time for that heated exchange. He arranged the meet through back channels. A neutral ground, the abandoned pier at Absecon Inlet, under a sky bruised with clouds. Nucky arrived first, flanked by Eddie and a pair of stone-faced guards, his overcoat flapping in the wind. Tommy stepped from the shadows alone, hands visible. "You called the dogs on me, Nucky." Nucky's laugh was bitter. "And you poisoned my well, Shelby. Vital's men torched one of my trucks this morning. Said I was selling them out. Mickey's cut ties. Even Eli's giving me the cold shoulder. Tommy lit a cigarette, the flame illuminating his scarred cheek. Allies choose sides when trust erodes. You eroded it first. Liar, Nucky spat. You've been undercutting me since day one. New York was never partnership. It was conquest. The wind howled, waves crashing like accusations. Loyalties hung in the balance. One wrong word, and blood would flow anew. Tommy's men watched from the tree line, razors ready. Nucky's guards fingered triggers. You nearly cost me everything tonight, Tommy said, voice steel. 2 good lads dead. Feds breathing down my neck. Nucky's eyes narrowed. Collateral dudley. Like the whispers you've spread. But here's the truth, Shelby. I built this coast. You sail in with your English swagger, thinking you can take it? The feds were a warning. Next time, it's not nearly. Tommy exhaled smoke, stepping closer. Warnings cut both ways. Your empire's crumbling because you cling too tight. Let go of New York, and we rebuild. Fight me, and it all burns. Nucky hesitated, the weight of betrayal etching lines on his face. Eddie's hand twitched toward his gun. Across the pier, a Peaky scout shifted in the shadows. Tension crackled, a live wire ready to spark. In that charged silence, a shot rang out. Not from them, but from the darkness. Mickey Doyle's Irish enforcers, drawn by the rumors, mistook the gathering for a hit. Bullets flew wild. Eddie's chest exploded in red, and he toppled into the surf. One of Nucky's guards fired back, dropping an Irishman. But another round caught a Peaky watcher in the throat, silencing him forever. Chaos reigned, men shouting, guns blazing into the night. Tommy and Nucky dove for cover behind pilings, the crossfire of deception claiming its toll. Minor players, Eddie, the loyal lieutenant, Paddy, an Irish thug, quiet observers, all fodder for the grinder. As the smoke cleared, bodies strewn like driftwood, Tommy and Nucky rose, glaring across the bloodied pier. This ends now, Nucky growled. Tommy holstered his Webley, eyes unyielding. Or it begins. The neon betrayals had peaked, loyalties shattered like glass underfoot. The boardwalk awaited its showdown, empires teetering on the edge of dawn. Chapter 9. Boardwalk Showdown. The salt-laced wind whipped across the Atlantic City docks like a siren's warning, carrying the distant hum of the boardwalk's revelry. It was well past midnight on a humid August night in 1927, and the moon hung low over the black waters, casting silvery ripples that danced mockingly on the waves. Tommy Shelby stood at the edge of the pier, his flat cap pulled low over his piercing blue eyes, a cigarette dangling from his lips as he watched the hulking freighter, the Midnight Lark, ease into berth. This was it. The biggest load yet. Crates upon crates of prime Scotch whiskey, smuggled straight from the misty hills of Scotland, enough to drown the thirst of every speakeasy from here to Chicago. But Tommy's gut twisted with unease. Trust was a currency rarer than gold in this game, and tonight, with Nucky Thompson's men overseeing the unload, that currency felt counterfeit. Beside him, Arthur Shelby puffed on his own smoke, his broad shoulders tense under his rumpled suit. "This feels off, Tommy," he muttered, glancing at the cluster of Thompson's enforcers milling about under the harsh glare of dockside lanterns. They were a rough lot, broad-faced Irishmen and sharp-eyed Italians, all armed to the teeth, their Tommy guns slung casually over shoulders like fishing rods. Nucky's been too quiet since that Fed business in New York. Like a cat playing with a mouse before the kill. Tommy exhaled a plume of smoke, his expression unreadable. "Quiet's better than the alternative, Arthur. We've got the booze, the roots, and half his New York buyers whispering in our ears. If he double-crosses us tonight, it's his empire that bleeds first." But even as he spoke, Tommy's hand drifted to the Webley revolver tucked in his waistband, a cold comfort against the chill creeping up his spine. The alliance had frayed like an old rope. Threadbare from months of side deals, leaked intel, and bodies piling up in alleys from here to Birmingham. Tommy had sown the seeds of discord. Whispers to Nucky's rivals, doctored ledgers showing Thompson skimming profits. But he hadn't anticipated Nucky striking back so soon, or so savagely. The Midnight Lark's gangplank thudded down, and the unload began in earnest. Crates were hauled off by a chain of sweating men, the wood groaning under the weight of liquid gold. Tommy's Peaky blinders, a dozen hardened lads from Small Heath, shipped over to handle the muscle, worked alongside Nucky's crew, their razor-capped heads bobbing in the lamplight. The air reeked of brine, tar, and the faint, peaty scent of whiskey seeping from a cracked barrel. For a moment, it seemed the operation might proceed smoothly, a testament to the fragile pact that had lined both men's pockets. Then, the first shot cracked the night like thunder. It came from the shadows near the warehouse stacks, a muffled pop from a silenced pistol. One of Tommy's men, young Finn, crumpled to the dock, clutching his thigh as blood bloomed dark against his trousers. Chaos erupted in an instant. Shouts rang out, guns were drawn, and the Peaky blinders fanned out instinctively, seeking cover behind crates. "Ambush!" Arthur bellowed, firing wildly into the gloom. But it wasn't rivals. It was Nucky's own men turning their weapons on the Shelbys. Tommy saw it clear as day. Eddie Kessler, Nucky's wiry right hand, barking orders from the pier's end, his face twisted in grim determination. The double cross. Nucky had sold them out, tipping off his crew to seize the shipment and eliminate the British interlopers in one bloody stroke. Bullets whizzed through the air, splintering wood and pinging off metal mooring posts. Tommy dove behind a stack of nets, his heart pounding as he returned fire, dropping one of Nucky's shooters with a precise shot to the chest. "Run for the boardwalk!" Tommy yelled to his surviving men, his voice cutting through the din. The docks were a kill zone, exposed and unforgiving. They had to move, blend into the crowds, turn the tables. Arthur grabbed Finn, hoisting the boy over his shoulder, while the others scattered, crates exploding around them as gunfire chewed through the night. Tommy bolted first, legs pumping over the slick planks, the freighter's bulk shielding him momentarily from the pursuit. Bullets nipped at his heels, one grazing his calf with a hot sting that nearly buckled him. He pushed through the pain, weaving past startled dock workers who scattered like rats. Behind him, the unload devolved into a slaughter, bodies hitting the water with wet splashes, the acrid smell of gunpowder mingling with the sea's tang. The boardwalk loomed ahead, a glittering ribbon of temptation under strings of neon lights that buzzed like angry hornets. Atlantic City at its peak. Throngs of vacationers in straw hats and flapper dresses, laughing and swaying to the brassy wail of jazz spilling from open-air pavilions. Carousel music tinkled innocently. Cotton candy sweetened the air, and the ocean's roar provided a mocking underscore to the violence about to crash upon it. Tommy burst onto the boards, the crowd parting in confusion as he shouldered through. His cap was gone, lost in the sprint, and blood trickled from a shallow gash on his forehead where shrapnel had kissed him. "Peaky!" he shouted, rallying his men as they emerged one by one. Harried and bleeding, Arthur dumped Finn behind a hot dog stand, the kid's face pale but fierce. Nucky's forces spilled out after them, a pack of wolves in tailored suits, guns blazing. The first screams pierced the jazz as innocent bystanders realized the nightmare unfolding. A woman in a beaded gown shrieked, clutching her pearls, while a group of gamblers dove for cover behind arcade games. Bullets shattered a saltwater taffy booth, sending sticky shards flying and ricocheted off the steel rails of the pier's edge. The chase ignited the boardwalk into pandemonium. Tommy led his blinders in a ragged line, ducking under roller coaster supports and vaulting benches slick with spilled soda. Neon signs flickered overhead. Steel Pier, $1 Million Pier, Absecon Lighthouse, their electric glow painting the scene in lurid reds and blues. Jazz horns blared from a nearby club, the saxophone's sultry cry now a soundtrack to death, as if the city itself were weeping. Arthur spun, firing back at their pursuers, dropping a burly Irishman who tumbled into a cluster of arcade prizes. "Bastards came from inside," he roared, his eyes wild with rage. Personal vendettas fueled the fury now. Tommy thought of the lieutenant Nucky had assigned months ago, the one he'd quietly had knifed in an alley for spying too closely. Nucky, no doubt, remembered the Irish enforcers Tommy had ambushed on those riskier routes, their bodies washing up like driftwood. This wasn't just business. It was retribution, raw and unyielding. They reached the heart of the boardwalk, where the crowds were thickest, a sea of oblivious joy. Tommy shoved through a knot of dancers swaying to a live band's frantic rhythm, the clarinet weaving through the gunfire like a mad melody. A Peaky blinder Jack took a round to the shoulder and went down swinging, his razor slashing at an attacker's throat before he was trampled underfoot. Nucky himself appeared then, emerging from a side alley like a ghost from the Ritz-Carlton, his pinstripe suit impeccable despite the chaos. He held a pearl-handled Colt, firing with measured precision, his face a mask of calculated fury. Their eyes met across the milling throng. Tommy's cold and appraising, Nucky's burning with betrayal. "Shelby?" Nucky bellowed, his voice carrying over the screams. "You think you can carve up my city like it's Birmingham backwater?" Tommy didn't reply, not yet. He signaled his men to split, drawing Nucky's forces thin. The blinders vanished into the alleys feeding the boardwalk, using the shadows to regroup. Gunfire echoed off the wooden planks, punching holes in signs and sending fireworks from a vendor's cart exploding prematurely in bursts of color. A child wailed, separated from his mother. A cabbie gunned his engine, tires screeching as he fled the madness. The firefight raged in fits and starts, pockets of violence erupting amid the fleeing crowds. Tommy's calf burned with every step, but adrenaline sharpened his senses. He cornered one of Nucky's men behind a fortune-teller's tent, the air thick with incense and cordite. The man lunged, knife flashing, but Tommy sidestepped and cracked him across the jaw with his revolver's butt, leaving him sprawled in the sawdust. Panting, Tommy pushed on, the boardwalk narrowing toward the pier's end where the ocean crashed relentlessly. His men were dwindling, 4 down, maybe more. But Nucky's losses mounted too, the locals turning the tide with their knowledge of the terrain. Arthur appeared at his side, bloody but grinning, maniacally. "Got 3 of the fuckers, Tommy. For Finn." Finn, it turned out, hadn't made it. A stray bullet had found him amid the hot dog stand's ruins. The loss hit Tommy like a gut punch, fueling the fire in his veins. Personal now, more than ever. They funneled toward the steel pier's amusement rides, the massive wooden structure groaning under the weight of panicked feet. Nucky's voice rang out again, closer now. "It's over, Shelby. Your boats, your roots, they're mine now." Tommy whirled, spotting Nucky atop a bandstand, his silhouette framed by the jazz band's abandoned instruments. The leader raised his gun, but Tommy was faster, squeezing off a shot that splintered the railing beside Nucky's head. The boardwalk king ducked, cursing, and his remaining men closed in. The clash peaked in a brutal melee. Fists flew alongside bullets. Knives glinted in the neon haze. Tommy grappled with an Italian enforcer, the man's breath hot and garlicky as they tumbled over the railing, dangling precariously above the surf. With a surge of strength, Tommy drove his knee into the man's gut and shoved him into the waves below, where he vanished with a final gurgle. Arthur waded into the fray, his straight razor claiming another victim, vengeance for his kin etched in every slash. But Nucky's numbers held, and a shot clipped Arthur's arm, sending him staggering. Wounded himself, calf throbbing, shoulder grazed, Tommy fought through the pain, a Peaky blinder's unyielding resolve. He reached the bandstand as Nucky descended, the 2 leaders circling each other amid the wreckage. Overturned tables, shattered glass glittering like diamonds. The jazz record still spinning mockingly on a phonograph. "You set this up," Tommy accused, revolver trained steady despite the blood dripping into his eye. "After all the deals, the blood we've spilled together. For what?" A bigger slice of the pie. Nucky's Colt mirrored Tommy's aim, his chest heaving. A gash marred his cheek, courtesy of the chaos, and his suit hung in tatters. Around them, the boardwalk smoldered, sirens wailing in the distance. The crowds long fled, leaving only the dead and dying. Bodies lay strewn like discarded confetti, the neon lights flickering erratically, casting their faces in shifting shadows. "You slithered in here, Shelby, with your English tricks and your razor gangs," Nucky spat, his Atlantic City drawl thick with contempt. "Poisoned my alliances, stole my buyers. I built this empire from sand and salt water. You're just a thief in the night." The air hung heavy between them, guns cocked, fingers itching on triggers. Personal vendettas burned bright. The lieutenant's death, the ambushed shipments, the whispers that had eroded their pact. Destruction loomed, one pull away, a mutual end that would leave the coast to vultures. But Tommy saw the flicker in Nucky's eyes, the same weary calculation he knew from his own mirror. Empires didn't fall easy. They bent, reformed. "We end this now, and we're both ghosts," Tommy said, voice low and steady. "Feds circling, rivals waiting, or we pact again. Divide the lines clean. No more games. Your city, my roots. Share the dawn." Nucky's jaw tightened, the Colt wavering ever so slightly. The ocean roared its indifference, the neon buzzed on, and in that suspended breath, two kings weighed oblivion against uneasy survival. Chapter 10. Empire's Dawn. The salt-laced wind off the Atlantic still carried the faint echo of gunfire as dawn crept over the boardwalk, painting the neon signs in hues of bruised purple and fading gold. Bodies lay scattered like discarded playing cards amid the debris of shattered glass and splintered wood. The revelers of the night before long scattered into the shadows. Tommy Shelby leaned against the railing of the pier, his right arm bound in a makeshift sling, blood seeping through the fabric from a graze that burned like hellfire. His flat cap was tilted low over eyes that had seen too much in too short a time, scanning the horizon where the sea met the sky. The ambush had been a masterpiece of chaos, Nucky's men clashing with his Peaky blinders in a storm of lead and fury. But in the end, it was the kind of mess that forced men like them to the table. Across the way, in the dim glow of a back alley speakeasy tucked behind the Ritz-Carlton, Nucky Thompson nursed a tumbler of scotch, his tailored suit rumpled and torn at the sleeve. A deep gash above his eye was hastily stitched, courtesy of a Peaky blade that had come too close. His face, usually a mask of calculated charm, was etched with exhaustion and a simmering rage. The boardwalk bloodbath had cost him 3 good men, not to mention the headlines that would scream of gang violence come morning. But worse than the dead was the fracture in his empire, the kind that rivals like the Irish and Italians would sniff out like sharks to blood. He swirled the amber liquid, his mind replaying the standoff. Tommy's unyielding stare, the way the Englishman had spat accusations amid the smoke. They had both walked away alive, but barely, and now the city whispered of war. By midday, under a sky heavy with the threat of rain, the two men converged on neutral ground, a weathered lighthouse at the edge of the dunes, far from prying eyes and the clamor of Atlantic City. Tommy arrived first, flanked by Arthur and John Shelby, their razor-capped heads bowed against the wind, hands twitching near hidden holsters. Nucky pulled up in a black Packard, accompanied by his Lieutenant Eli Thompson and a pair of stone-faced enforcers. No grand entrance, no fanfare, just the crunch of gravel under tires and the distant crash of waves. Tommy stepped forward, his limp barely noticeable, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "Nucky," he said, voice low and gravelly, the Birmingham accent cutting through the salt air like a knife. "We both look like we've been through the wars. Question is, do we finish him here, or call a truce?" Nucky eyed him, the politician's smile flickering, but not quite reaching his eyes. "Truce? After your boys turned my boardwalk into a slaughterhouse? You're lucky I don't have the feds crawling all over your ship by now, Shelby." Tommy exhaled smoke, unperturbed. And you're lucky my lads didn't put a bullet in that silver tongue of yours. We both know this wasn't just about last night. It's been building since I set foot on your docks. Ambition's a funny thing. It makes allies of enemies, until it doesn't. They retreated inside the lighthouse, the spiral stairs creaking under their weight, leading to a circular room with windows cracked by years of storms. A scarred oak table dominated the space, flanked by mismatched chairs. Maps of the eastern seaboard were unrolled across its surface, marked with routes in red ink, smuggling paths from Canada, hidden coves in Jersey, distribution lines snaking into New York. Eli hovered by the door, arms crossed, while Arthur and John took positions opposite, the air thick with unspoken threats. Nucky sat first, gesturing for Tommy to join him. Let's cut the bullshit then. Your Peaky blinders have guts, I'll give you that. Routed my men like it was nothing. But you've got no roots here. No politicians in your pocket, no judges on the payroll. One word from me, and you're done. Tommy leaned forward, stubbing out his cigarette on the table's edge. And you've got the law breathing down your neck, Nucky. That raid on the warehouse? The feds are circling like vultures. My roots from England. Clean, precise. They're your lifeline now. Without 'em, your empire dries up faster than this godforsaken country. The negotiation stretched into the afternoon, voices rising and falling like the tide outside. Territories were carved up with the precision of a surgeon's blade. Nucky retained iron control over Atlantic City and the Jersey Shore, his political machine, ensuring safe passage for incoming loads. Tommy claimed the New York markets, the bustling underbelly of speakeasies and jazz clubs where his whiskey would flow, like the Hudson itself. Shared routes were agreed upon. Canadian borders for bulk hauls. English ships for the premium scotch that fetched top dollar. Manpower would be pooled for protection. Peaky blinders, street-hardened fighters bolstering Nucky's organization against common foes. But no more side deals, Nucky insisted, jabbing a finger at the map. You siphon one more client from my network, and this ends in blood. Again. Tommy's eyes narrowed, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Trust is earned, not demanded. But I'll play fair, as long as you keep the Irish wolves at bay. By dusk, the accord was sealed with a handshake that felt more like a vice grip, witnessed by their wary seconds. Papers were drafted on the spot, unsigned but binding in the underworld's code. The transatlantic smuggling ring reshaped itself in their image. Shelby precision meeting Thompson cunning, a pact forged in the fires of betrayal but tempered by mutual survival. As they descended the stairs, the first drops of rain pattered against the lighthouse windows. Nucky paused at the door, turning to Tommy. This changes nothing about last night, Shelby. Men deed. Good men. Tommy met his gaze, unflinching. Wars like that. Costs more than you think, until you look back and see what you've built on the bones. The drive back to the city was somber, the Packard cutting through sheets of rain that blurred the neon glow of the boardwalk. Nucky stared out the window, the weight of the day settling like lead in his chest. Ambition had brought him to this precipice, ruling Atlantic City like a king, only to watch it crack under the strain of outsiders like Shelby. He'd lost friends in the firefight, loyal souls who'd manned his docks for years. And for what? A tentative peace that could shatter with the next whisper from a rival? The Irish mob was already rumbling, their enforcers spotted skulking in Philly dives, plotting to exploit the divide. Federal agents, too, emboldened by the violence, were raiding warehouses up and down the coast. Yet here he was, dividing spoils with a man who'd once aimed to topple him. It was a high-wire act, and Nucky knew one slip meant the fall. Tommy, meanwhile, rode in a rented Ford with his brothers, the rain drumming on the roof like impatient fingers. His arm throbbed, a reminder of the bullet that had come too close, but pain was an old acquaintance. The accord was a victory, bittersweet as English ale. New York in his grasp. The Shelby Company Limited planting roots deep in American soil. Roots secured, territories marked. His whiskey would flood the cities, turning profit into power. But reflection came unbidden as the skyline loomed. The cost. Michael, His cousin lay buried back in Birmingham after a stray shot in the warehouse raid. Arthur's wild eyes had dulled, scarred by the endless cycle of violence. And Polly, sharp-tongued Polly, had wired from England, warning of cracks in the family empire from too much exposure across the pond. Ambition was a double-edged razor, cutting deepest those who wielded it. Days blurred into a fragile routine. Shipments resumed under the new Pact, crates of scotch and rye slipping through the night like ghosts. At the docks, Peaky blinders patrolled alongside Nucky's men, an uneasy alliance of accents and attitudes. Tommy oversaw the first joint haul from Canada, watching as trucks rumbled away under cover of fog, bound for New York speakeasies where flappers and fat cats alike would pay fortunes for a taste of the forbidden. In a dimly lit office above a garage in Brooklyn, now the Shelby foothold, Tommy pored over ledgers by lamplight. The numbers danced, profits swelling, roots multiplying. The company was stronger, tentacles reaching from Liverpool to the Lower East Side. But as he lit another cigarette, a knock echoed. John entered, face grim, holding a crumpled telegram. "Feds hit a warehouse in Philly last night," John said, tossing the paper down. "Lost 2 lads. Word is someone's talking. Maybe one of Nucky's old rivals feeding him tips." Tommy's jaw tightened. "And the Irish?" "Sighted near the bridges. Testing the waters, like." The peace was a thin veil, threats lurking in every shadow. Nucky, from his Ritz suite, received similar reports. Italian whispers of retaliation. A judge turning state's evidence under pressure. He paced the Persian rug, scotch in hand, Eli watching from the corner. "We hold the line," Nucky murmured. "Shelby's our buffer now. But if he steps wrong..." Eli nodded. Eyes on him, always. One evening, as jazz spilled from the Cotton Club and the city thrummed with illicit energy, Tommy and Nucky crossed paths again. At a neutral gala thrown by a mutual supplier. A lavish affair in a Harlem ballroom, where crystal chandeliers glittered like stars. Suits and gowns swirled amid the saxophone's wail, glasses clinking with smuggled champagne. They met in a side alcove, away from the revelry. To new beginnings, Nucky toasted, raising his glass, though his eyes held no warmth. Tommy clinked his, the sound sharp. To survival. As the night wore on, Tommy slipped into the crowd, making contacts, weaving the Shelby web tighter. Nucky watched from afar, his lieutenant murmuring updates. Shelby shipments on the rise, but no overt betrayals. Yet, the watchful eye remained, a silent promise that trust was a luxury neither could afford. In the quiet hours before dawn, Tommy stood on a New York rooftop, the skyline a jagged silhouette against the paling sky. The Empire State Building pierced the horizon, a monument to American dreams and nightmares. The Shelby Company Limited had dawned here, forged in blood and bargain. But the shadows of Atlantic City lingered. Ambition's price was etched in every scar, every lost soul. And as the first light broke, Tommy knew. Empires rose on such foundations, but they teetered too, waiting for the next storm.